We'd been on the road for about 5 weeks cycling through France, and we finally had our next big destination, Corisca. It's an island nearby. And to get to it, we were going to follow rivers and valleys as we snaked our way south to Toulon, which is on the coast. That's right, I can say that in a French accent. Where we then take the overnight ferry to Corisca. Our next stop was to visit Odile, one of Liliana's oldest friends, who was working on a farm that she'd been living on for the last few years. We spent a lovely evening having a few beers and catching up. There was also a peacock just like cutting about the garden, which was really weird at first and actually just weird in general. The next morning, Odile put Liliana to work as a shepherd as we moved the cows from one farm to another. Farms are absolutely stinking. Don't let anyone ever tell you otherwise. It's just a fact. After the morning shepherding, we hit the road again, but we got into some serious headwind which blasted us in the face. With massive heavy bikes fully packed like we've got, a little bit of wind can really slow you down, and it just totally affects your mental state, as well as much harder to push the bikes along the road. To make matters worse, we were hit by some terrible hay fever. I could hardly see and we were both feeling incredibly drowsy. It quickly became clear that we should find a spot to stop, even though we hadn't done much kilometres at all, probably only around 30 kilometres. There's no point in cycling if you're not having a good time. What's the point? Welcome to Bruce le Chateau, or as I like to call it, Bruce the Castle. We've been riding and we started to get into some hilly parts, and then we got into a series of lots of like plateaus and then like kind of valleys and stuff. It's been really difficult and there's been a lot of headwinds and we've both been suffering quite a lot from hay fever. So very thankful now to be in this nice valley which will follow all the way up to the Gorges du Tarn, and then we'll go through this big massive regional park and down towards the south coast. So that's the kind of plan the next week and a bit, but it's been good. We've been going pretty slow, but I think we've both been quite tired, and yeah, hay fever is a real killer for cycling. But now we're going to continue on down this valley, down this river, and camp somewhere soon because it's like 5:20. Time to stop. Hopefully there's beer at the campsite. If not, why? The Vallée du Tarn is probably one of the most picturesque routes to cycle in France. It goes right through national parks and then eventually cuts into these big massive gorges with incredibly high sides. It's super scenic and the river has this amazing colour, sort of blue-green. Since it was still really early in the season, it felt like we had the whole area to ourselves as well. Quiet roads, amazing views, and plenty of spots to take endless panoramas, which Liliana had got seriously into. Since we were literally taking so many pictures, we were making slow progress, but to be honest, it was actually fine and we weren't really in a rush, and it was more important to take our time and enjoy ourselves. As we approached one place, it turned out the campsite was closed, so we ended up going to a campervan car park as the weather got much worse. Snuggled right in between some happy campers, we set up and hid there hoping the police wouldn't cause us trouble. The people there were really nice and it turned out it was free to park there. They had electricity and water and toilets and showers and everything, so people would actually stay there for quite a long time. We had a great spot for dinner, great views, and it was lovely. In the morning, it was pretty grim weather-wise. I remember standing there making coffee in the rain and porridge while people watched from their mad, nice, cozy vans. Like, why don't you invite us in, you absolute bastards? Sitting there in your mad, fancy camper vans. They didn't even put out an awning for us. I was not impressed with these happy campers. We'd managed to sort of warm showers hosted Mio, so we had a good cycle knowing that we'd have a dry night. As we approached, there was this big mad viaduct and I was, for some reason, totally engrossed by it. We stopped off at a supermarket, picked up some beers and picked up some nice things to eat, but the hosts actually weren't interested at all, so it was more for us, I suppose. But it was a bit weird. You kind of always want to bring something as a guest, but it's hard to know what they're going to enjoy. They had a really amazing flat which used to be a factory, and even though they were a wee bit older, it was actually really nice to catch up with them. I did get a bit lost in the French conversation towards the end, but in the end of the day, you can't argue with having lovely hosts to take care of you and shelter you from the rain. The next day, sadly, it was pouring all morning again. We did try to stay as long as we could, secretly hoping they'd ask us to stay for another night, but were forced to hit the road again. Luckily, the weather did start to clear, but we'd given ourselves a pretty short distance to go. Some mega world tour cyclists might balk at the small distances we were covering in a day, but our primary objective was good times and good vibes, so if it meant a short cycle, that was totally fine with us. We got to La Rosier, which had a million campsites in it. It's obviously a really popular tourist place, but most of them were actually shut. We did find one open place and it was a bit quirky. The owner had banned phones from the bar, which I get the sentiment, but I was a bit like, get over yourself, you mad smelly hippie. The gorge was just as stunning as I thought it might be, and probably much more. It really surprised me, as I hadn't really realised how nice this part of France was going to be. And we also kept lucking out by stopping for coffee just before the rain would come on.
Vallée du Tarn.
We got to another campsite pretty early and set up an elaborate drying system for our clothes which we'd just washed. It absolutely did not work, and it made things so much worse because now instead of just having clothes that were a wee bit smelly, they were all absolutely soaking, and it was so damp and just kept raining, and it was a bit of a disaster. Also, the guy that worked there was such a fanny, and he walked all over our tent one time, which just really annoyed me. He just seemed so obnoxious. Amazingly, near Florac, there was an Intermarché that had a outside laundry mat, which is something that I've never seen before, probably never will again, but there's nothing as pure in life as warm, fresh clothes.
We are just a few days into our 6th week on the road. And we've just finished the Gorges du Tarn over the last few days, taking it real nice and slow, so we can enjoy the wonderful scenery. The weather's finally picked up. The sun's come back out, which is very, very nice, so I can keep working on my tan. And now we are heading to Alès, over the Cevennes, over the Route de Crête, which is meant to be nice. It looks like it's going to go up, 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 up for a long time, and then down for longer, which is exactly what we want. But it's been nice. It's a part of France that we've never really been to, although we were close to it a few years ago. We're not really sure why we didn't come here, because it's very, very beautiful. The roads will be nice and quiet, it's off season, so excellent riding. And all our clothes are dry as well, because they were wet for a couple of days, because we couldn't find a dryer. But all has been resolved, and now looking forward to a wonderful day of cycling to Alès. See you later!
We were told by some other bike tourists we'd met on the road that the best route over the mountains was the Route de Crête. Was a Route de Crête. Actually not sure what it was called, but I think it was that. They said it was the best because it never really got above 10% gradients. It was really beautiful and scenic, and it was going to be an easy, fun ride. They were 100% right. We got to top with no bother, and we were greeted by some amazing vistas, just in time to see a bunch of thunderclouds rolling in fast.
Thunder! Thunder! Thunder!
We were busy laughing and joking and being high on the views, and we felt like we were at the end of weeks of a big journey to the top of this mountain. Quickly though, the weather was closing in and it started to feel a bit sketchy. We started wondering, can we get struck by lightning on a bike? But after a quick debate, we decided that no, you cannot, because the rubber tyres will protect you like you'd be protected if you got struck by lightning in a car. This, of course, is absolute nonsense. You will die if you get struck by lightning on a bike. In fact, you're probably much more likely to be struck by lightning cycling a bike because it's metal and essentially a rolling lightning rod. We didn't really know what to do, but since the top had no shelter or trees, the only option was really to start heading back down the other side as we'd already planned. We were zooming down this mountain, going through literal clouds and seeing flashes of lightning. It was pretty terrifying, and at some points I was convinced that this is it. I'm going to die, I'm going to get electrocuted, but in the end, obviously, it was fine. We were now on the last stretch in our time in France. We continued our way east towards the Luberon National Park, after which we would then start heading for the coast. We passed over the Rhône at Beaucaire and Tarascon. I also managed to win a race with my colleague Sylvie to get to Saint-Rémy. It was, of course, a shame that we couldn't meet up, but winning always comes first. A big issue I was having at this point was that my ears were completely plugged with earwax. Both had almost no hearing by this point, and it was getting progressively worse. I'd been super disorientated, and it was also really affecting my mood. Luckily though, there was a doctor's in Cavaillon that we managed to make an appointment with. It meant that we'd have to stay there for 3 nights, which felt like a long time, but honestly it gave us some proper rest days just to sit, read, relax, and do any maintenance stuff we had to. We reached a town called Rions, where there was supposed to be a campsite, but we couldn't find it, and we kept getting conflicting stories of where we could go and the nearest spots. It was raining and we were feeling a bit lost at what to do. Now there probably was a lot of good spots nearby for wild camping, but since we'd been staying in proper camps for most of the trip, neither of us really felt confident to do it. The hotels were crazy expensive, and there was a B&B or a gîte which wasn't answering the calls. By total luck, a guy was just hanging out his window and asking us what we were going to do. He saw us a few times, and then his 8-year-old daughter must have taken pity on us and convinced her dad to let us stay. It turned out that he had a whole townhouse. He was a poet and an artist, and his wife was a teacher and a yoga instructor. They let us shower, warm up before we all sat and ate together. I was worried that we had imposed on them, but it actually wasn't awkward at all. They even asked us to stay for another day, but at this point we actually did have our ferry to catch. When people are counting in those sort of situations, it really does feel like a special thing. As we were getting closer to the coast, the routes were getting more and more awkward as small roads were getting swamped up by motorways. It's not the most exciting roads to cycle on, and a lot of the roads were flooded. We even passed one road which had turned into a river. We debated the safeness of our decision to cross it. For some reason I decided to put on waterproof socks and then just keep my shoes on. Lily opted to take her shoes off but put waterproof socks on. It seemed to work for both of us, even though we both almost slipped, which actually looking back on it was just such a ridiculous thing to have done. But there is a weird thing about travelling, especially by bike, where the idea of going back, even a short distance, is always the negative option. You'd rather just keep going forward and waste even more time just to not have to go back. We had a real treat for our big last day cycling in France. We climbed up a short distance, then had about 40 kilometres going downhill at around 25 kilometres per hour. It was excellent and we weren't expecting it at all. We hit the coast, stocked up as much as we could, as apparently everything in Corisca is overpriced, and then had a big celebration beer at the harbour. The weather had cleared up and we were so excited for the next part of the trip. The boat is a bit weird because if you don't buy a seat, which costs a lot more, or a special sleeping cabin, you basically have nowhere to sit or sleep. It's like so crazy. They have these bars on the top, even a swimming pool, and you have all these people hanging out, drinking, having a great time, and then they essentially close off all those areas and force all those people that don't have specially bought seats to find a place to go. There literally isn't any other free designated areas, so there's a bit of a mad scramble to find good corridor space to actually sleep on. We managed to get a decent spot and literally slept in a corridor, putting our sleeping mats to good use, anxiously awaiting the next part of our big journey.